topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Who is January Jones? She is not a young, beautiful, talented actress on Mad Men. She is not an older, gorgeous, exotic dancer from the Johnny Carson Show. She is an author, and she wrote Thou Shalt Not Whine, the 11th Commandment, that reached #1 at Amazon.com. She is a reality TV golf personality with World High Stakes Golf televised on HDNet. She is a humorist and winologist expert. She is your featured host today on January Jones Sharing Success Stories. So sit back, relax, and get ready to laugh and listen to Ms. Jones with her eclectic roster of guests as you learn life's lessons. These stories plus sharing equals success. Welcome, and remember, beware, because you are entering the no whining world of January Jones.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I can tell you it's going to get better, believe me. I'd like to welcome you to our podcast today. As you can see, I'm going with the Glitter Granny brand, and I've chosen gold as the Glitter Granny's color of the day to get us in the spirit of Christmas. Isn't this a wonderful time of year? I'm getting so excited, and I'm sure you are too. Now for my listeners, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been to a psychic? Well, if you have, I'm sure you remember it. And I hope it was a wonderful experience for you. We all remember these encounters. My very first psychic experience was incredible. It was with Sylvia Brown, and I was fortunate enough to go to her retreat in San Jose, California, and spend a few days with her. Amazing. Changed my life, and I'm sure this interview or this podcast today will change your life. Can you imagine what it would be like to have the afterlife explained to you in a way that you could actually understand it? Do you wish you could meet someone who could tell you about afterlife frequencies and answer your questions? Have you ever met someone who has talked to dead people? Well, you're in luck today because you're going to meet two people who have done it. Have you ever heard about an amazing book called The Afterlife Frequency? We're going to talk about it today, and I think it'll be a great Christmas present for anyone you know who has suffered a loss. If you can answer yes or maybe to any of these questions that I've asked you, then you are in the right place. And I am January Jones, welcoming you to January Jones Sharing Success Stories. So now it's time, rest, relax, go get some cheese, get some crackers, sit down, and let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. He is a psychic lawyer. Yes, you heard me right. That's an amazing title, isn't it? He's an Oxford-educated attorney, licensed to practice law in Florida and Washington, and before the Supreme Court. He's a traveler to mystical locations, remote corners of the ancient mysteries, and supernatural phenomena. He's been on the show before, and I am so pleased to welcome him back to the show and to actually get to see him in person finally. Welcome, Mark Anthony. How are you today, Mark?
I'm doing great, January. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And I have to disagree with the introduction of you where it says she's not a young and beautiful. Yes, you are. Let me tell you something. For all the listeners, the last time I was on January's show, it was strictly audio. And when
Yeah,
I got to see her today, it's like, wow, she's a knockout. So January, hats off. I mean,
I'll tip my hat to you, darling. As I approach 80 years, I'm kind of enjoying this renaissance of my youth transferring through middle age, old age, and now to the best part of life at all, the part where you're experienced and the part where you can pretty much say anything you want.
well, what's that old saying? A beautiful young person is an act of nature, and
Yeah.
a beautiful older person is a work of art.
Oh my
Eh,
God.
So you are, without a doubt, a work of art, both inside and out. And I appreciate that you have this forum to share ideas and concepts and things that you don't necessarily hear in the mainstream media.
Yeah, you don't. And, I wanted to talk a little bit before we get into the real interview about the pandemic. And I was curious to know how it affected you. In the intro, I mentioned my friend Sylvia Brown, and I was doing a little research on her today. And in 2008, before she passed in 2013, she actually predicted the pandemic. She predicted
Yes.
that it would happen in 2020. And what an amazing prediction. And this pandemic has just been so difficult for some. I call it the pandemic pause. Some people have struggled, and some people have come out of it better than ever. How has it worked out for you, Mark?
It definitely changed everything because as I entered 2020, I was putting the finishing touches on the afterlife frequency. So I was getting ready to do a whole nationwide tour, but I have to back up a bit. In the last quarter of 2019, I was doing readings for several people, and I'm a psychic medium, so I communicate with spirits. And in several readings, the spirits of my clients would come through and they all kept projecting surgical masks. And I was asking my clients, well, was that person in the medical profession? Or are you a nurse or a doctor? And they were like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And then they meaning the spirits, all kept talking March 2021, March 2021. Well, when March 2021 rolled around, excuse me, I started getting a flood of emails from people saying, now we know what this meant. The spirits were coming through and talking about when we had to start wearing masks in 2021. And I received several messages about COVID. It's affected me in many ways. I certainly started doing more online interviews. I have my own show now every Thursday on the Transformation Network, The Psychic and the Doc, with my co host, Dr. Pat Basili. So people call in and I do a reading, and she's a psychologist. So they get her uplifting insights. It's been very, very, very popular. We're going into our second year now.
Oh,
Uh,
well,
I, yeah, I finished the Afterlife Frequency, and I started writing for Best Holistic Life magazine as well. So people can find out about all that by visiting my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com, just like my book. But one thing that really astounded me, January, is during the lockdown, Spirit started giving me other messages. And I keep track of what happens because I call the other side. Not only do I call it the afterlife frequency, but I call the spirits there the collective consciousness.
okay.
And that's because spirits are connected to other spirits, connected to other spirits. And that's why, let's say I'm doing a reading for somebody and a spirit comes through and begins to give information that far exceeded the scope of anything that person knew when they were living in the material world and living in our world.
Hmm.
And they told me that humanity was given a glimpse of what we could do if we acted in unison, if we put our geniuses, our brain trust towards working together. It said, the pandemic was going to happen because human history is filled with one plague after the next.
Mhm.
And then I thought about what they meant, and think about it. For 6 weeks, all of a sudden, the sky in Mumbai, India, people could see the skyline because the pollution subsided. Same
Yeah.
thing in Beijing. In
Right.
Venice, Italy, for the first time in 400 years, dolphins were spotted. It's like nature and Mother Earth started rebounding. And then all of our medical scientists, our biologists, our brain trusts were sharing information worldwide on how to come up with treatments and a vaccine. We were given a glimpse that if we stop trying to destroy each other and
Mhm.
work together, that we have the intellect, the technology, and the ability to solve all of our problems. And it
Amazing.
was, and then all of a sudden, and I'm not going to get into the politics. We got to reopen the country. We got to do this, and there was this rush to get back.
Mhm.
When, for a brief moment, we caught a glimpse of what could happen if we stopped fighting and started communicating.
Um, this is this is why we're having the show today, dear. This is our message. And I'm all about positive programming and lifting people up and getting them to think about things in a different way. And right now, we're going to think about a book that I wrote called Thou Shalt Not Whine, the 11th Commandment. We're going to hear about that. And we'll be right back with Mark Anthony.
Lately, there's a whining epidemic in our world. People are even whining about whining. Are you sick and tired of listening to everyone whining all the time? So was January Jones, the author of Thou Shalt Not Whine, the 11th Commandment, that reached #1 at Amazon.com. Ms. Jones based her book on a survey of the top 10 things that people whine about at all ages and all stages of life. January is a success coach that can tell you how to help others. When you buy Thou Shalt Not Whine, the 11th Commandment, you'll find out what people whine about and how to stop them from whining. This is the perfect gift book to give or get for any occasion. Thou Shalt Not Whine was voted the best gift to be given anonymously for those special people in your life. Ms. Jones is an internationally known author in the style of Irma Bombeck, specializing in housewife humor, with her book being published in Korea and China. You can find Thou Shalt Not Whine at Amazon.com.
Welcome back with Mark Anthony. I'm so excited to have him on the book and on the podcast. His book, The Afterlife Frequency, has been a game changer, as I shared with Mark before we went on the show, in my family. My husband of 52 years has been a totally supportive skeptic. And I had him read the book this week. He couldn't put it down, which was an amazing thing for him to concentrate that long on anything. and he got it. It's like, Mark, the light bulb went off, because your explanation is a logical, scientific explanation that anyone can understand. And of course, he being an airline pilot and Army helicopter pilot, he read it, and it was, I have to tell you, quite frankly, it was a little miracle in our family.
Thank you. I'm honored. I'm very honored. And your husband is exactly the type of, well, I wrote the book for everyone, but what I was thinking was, if I were questioning this, how would I want to explain it? How would I want this explained to me? And the thing is, yes, I'm a psychic medium. I was born with the ability to perceive and communicate with spirits. but it's genetic in my family because both my father and my mother had these abilities. And my mother was a commercial illustrator and artist, and my dad he had been a Navy SEAL, and then he was an aerospace engineer.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
for dad was a real no nonsense guy, and seeing spirits, especially when he was in the military, kind of freaked him out. But he told me when I was 8 years old, I remember, and I loved my dad. Daddy was just awesome. And I remember I'm an 8-year old, and I knew that Daddy worked with astronauts. So to me, he was the coolest guy ever. We were looking at the stars, and he said that there is an explanation for everything. He said, Mark, there's no such thing as a mystery. There are only questions for which we do not yet have the answers. And if enough research, enough funding, and enough dedication goes into anything, you're going to come up with an answer. We may not figure it out right away. We may not even have the science or the technology to determine it, but eventually we will. And ultimately, it will be based on science. And so it resonated with me my entire life.
Mhm.
And I've never seen faith and science as mutually exclusive. And traditionally, for centuries, they have been. Ever since Sir Isaac Newton and the Enlightenment, it's like the scientists are in one corner of the boxing ring and the spiritual people of faith in the other, and it's been this constant struggle. But I've seen that within the past century, and I'd say since the late 1900s, with the late 1800s, the late 19th century, with the advent of quantum physics.
Yeah.
I think the distinction between faith and science is beginning to blur because in many ways they both discuss the same thing, but using different vernacular.
Yes. Yes. And what struck me when I was reading your book was your term, the electromagnetic soul. And that resonated with me because sadly, many years ago, my first husband was a test pilot who was killed testing a helicopter during the Vietnam War. And I was a young widow with 2 babies. And I had the experience of an after death conversation. And it's something that I treasure. It's something that changed my life. It's something that answered all my questions. I know I was very lucky to have that. But the description of electromagnetic soul just fits into that experience that I had.
That is a term that is the culmination of my life's research.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
And where that comes from, in a nutshell, is we know that everything we learn in science class in school that everything's made of molecules. Molecules in turn are composed of atoms. Atoms in turn are composed of electrons, protons, and neutrons. And we now know that they are composed of the smallest particle, which is a quantum. And an electron technically is a quantum because it's the negative charge of a quantum. And it's 1/1800th the size of a proton. But long story short, January, everything on the most basic level is a quantum, which is a particle of electromagnetic energy. And on the subatomic level, biology and physics no longer are separate because we're dealing with electromagnetic energy. And that means you, me, the air that we're breathing, the radio waves that this show is being broadcast,
Mhm.
chairs we're sitting on, not to mention the surface of Mars, are all made at the same subatomic level of electromagnetic energy. And then what has every um, um, great teacher of faith taught us since ancient India, then through Zoroaster, Moses, Buddha, Jesus, Confucius, Muhammad, all the way up to the modern era, that our soul pre-exists the body, comes into the body, moves on after the body. And we now know from the field of neuroscience that the brain does not create consciousness, it merely hosts it, like your computer hard drive hosts the programs on it. And then physics pops in again. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. And all of a sudden, this all clicked with me. It all came together. So the electromagnetic soul is a description of what we really are. Pure consciousness, which you can call a soul or a spirit, that is eternal electromagnetic energy. And my friend and colleague, Dr. Gary Schwartz, who's the head of parapsychology, psychology, physics, surgery, and is working on the Soul Phone project, technology to communicate with spirits, he presented the electromagnetic soul in one of his lectures. It was such an honor. I was in the audience and I was like blown away when he brought the book up. And he said, I want to take this a step further with what Mark's saying, because people have said, well, that sounds all very technical. He said, well, then look at it this way. Electromagnetic soul, and soul stands for source of universal love.
Oh, wow.
And there we have it. You know, because love is energy. I mean, let's face it, loving someone's very exhausting. I mean, it can be wonderful and all that. And if you have teenagers, you really know how exhausting that can be. But and I'm slightly joking there, but the truth is we now are beginning to see parallels between what people of faith have been teaching us with electromagnetic energy. Think of Moses encountering the burning bush. The bush that burned, yet did not burn. So if you lived in the Bronze Age, like Moses did, and suddenly you were encountering an intensive concentration of electromagnetic energy, aka God, how would you describe that? You would use the terminology you were familiar with. And in the Bronze Age, outside of lightning, the most powerful form of radiant energy was fire. So he's seeing this encounter, yet it's not consuming or burning this bush. And you get the same thing in the Pentecost in the New Testament, where after Jesus has departed this world, I mean, after the account of the resurrection, where his mother Mary and his disciples, all of a sudden they begin to channel, if you will, the power of the Holy Spirit, and they see tongues of fire above each of their heads. Now, for people in yoga, chakras, for people who are psychics, we see chakras. And the crown chakra, the one associated with the pituitary gland in your brain, when you see the crown chakra, it tends to waver and flicker. So now you're in the Iron Age. How would you describe that? It looked like a tongue of fire. And I mean, I could go on and on because all the different faiths talk about this. You think about halos in art. I mean, behind me, you see I have a statue, a replica of one of the objects taken from Tutankhamun's tomb, and it's the goddess Isis, and she's got a halo. Well, the ancient Egyptians had halos, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Jains, Christians, Muslims. You go through the art throughout the millennia. What's a halo? A halo is an aura. What is an aura? Well, a light bulb has an aura. Why? Because it has an electromagnetic field and you're seeing the glow of that field. Surprise, people have them too. So that's part of what the EMS, the electromagnetic soul theory, that I present in the Afterlife Frequency explains.
It's incredible. And, when I lost my first husband, I knew that he was pure energy. And as you discuss in your book so brilliantly, energy is constant. It never changes. It never goes away. It's always out there. And now we're finding out that it's out there and willing and able to reconnect with some of us if we're lucky. Right now, we're going to have a commercial after I turn my watch phone off.
Let me ask you a question. Are you still wondering who killed Kennedy? Over 50 years later, the assassination is still a mystery. It is unfinished business for our country. Now, get ready for a theory that you've never heard before, but will make more sense than any other conspiracy theory that you've ever heard in the past. January Jones speaks the unspeakable in her book, Jackie, Ari, and Jack, The Tragic Love Triangle, connecting Jackie and Aristotle Onassis romantically prior to JFK's assassination. Did you know that Ari was Jackie's guest in the White House during the JFK funeral? He was the only non-family member who was invited by Jackie to stay there during the funeral. Aristotle Onassis was one of the wealthiest men in the world, with the means, the motive, and the money to order an assassination that was the perfect crime of the last century. Ari needed class, and Jackie needed cash. They were perfect for each other. Now, what is Camelot? It is but another tragic love triangle. Jackie, Ari, and Jack is available at JanuaryJones.com, Amazon.com, and audiobooks.com, read by Ms. Jones.
Welcome back. Hard to believe it's been 60 years since the assassination, and people are still asking who killed Kennedy. I'm here today with Mark Anthony, and people are asking him all the time about how this works. Could you explain? But he's done it. He has accomplished the job, and his book, The Afterlife Frequency, is must reading, especially a great gift during the holidays if you have anyone who has had a loss or is struggling. Okay, Mark, let's go back. We talked about electromagnetic soul. The other thing that really resonated with me in your book was when you talked about being accessible, allowing it to happen. And you use the term raft, R-A-F-T. And that really resonated with me. Let's talk about that a little bit. What does R stand for?
Yeah, the raft technique. Well, I was here in my office and I was working on the afterlife frequency. And I wanted to see, not everyone's a psychic or a medium. We all have the same basic physiology. We all have the same physiology. So we're all capable of having a psychic or mediumistic experience. And people say, well, why can't I do it, the way you do it? It's like, well, why can't I play guitar like Eric Clapton or swim like, Michael Phelps? Okay. Yeah. It's or do math like Stephen Hawking. The thing is, we're all good at doing different things, but we can still have the experience. I mean, I can bang around on a piano, but don't expect, Elton John or Rachmaninoff to happen. So I'm sitting here like, I got to figure this out. And I hit the dreaded writer's block. In January, you're a writer. So, and doesn't it always happen on the day that you've scheduled just to work on your book? Okay. And whenever I'm in a hurry or I have an appointment, all of a sudden I get these brilliant ideas. I got to make a couple notes real quick before it leaks out and I forget it. But so I'm sitting here and nothing. I mean, dead end, nothing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go for a walk on the beach. I live near the ocean. So I'm walking down my driveway and suddenly I get these cold chills and tingles. Well, I knew that was electromagnetic activity. Okay. And I thought, okay. And see, that's why people think spirit communication is scary, because that's the same physical sensation that you get in fight or flight. So people immediately jump to the conclusion, in spirit contact that it's negative. But you have to realize it's a neurological response to an electromagnetic impulse. Okay. And then I realized I was being directed in the opposite direction to walk down this bike path. So I go, okay. So I walk down this bike path. It's around 11 in the morning, and I see these two objects shining in the light. And I walk up to them, and it's a nickel and a penny. And, both my parents are in spirit. And I bent over to pick them up, and I hear a mom's voice. If their head's down, it's bad luck. And I start laughing because my mom's family was of Italian descent. And I love my Italian heritage, but boy, we have a superstition for all occasions. So I'm laughing, and then I hear my dad, his family, they were waspy Baptist Pennsylvanians, and he goes, it's money, grab it. And I'm laughing, and I'm holding this nickel and a penny in my hand, and all of a sudden I go, 6 cents. And then it hits me, 6 cents. The next thing that happened, I see an image of my father in my mind's eye. Now,
Okay.
granted, he had been a Navy SEAL, he was a NASA engineer, but he also was a swimming instructor and a scuba diver. And I see him in my mind's eye standing up to his waist in the ocean, near the beach that I grew up on, holding this blue canvas raft. And I remember that raft. We used to, ride waves on it, and we had a lot of fun with it. And I go, raft, raft. And then I hear my parents' voices in unison. Mark, teach people to recognize signs from spirits, accept the contact is real, feel it without overthinking, and trust the message. And then I'm like, oh my God, raft technique. And I ran back. The words just flew out of me. I mean, I typed and typed that. I didn't care about grammar. I just got everything that they were giving me down. And then I realized that was one of the most important messages that I could pass on to people, to teach everyone how to recognize signs from spirits. Well, let's look at how I got it. They walked me through it. All of a sudden, I'm having writer's block, so I get these tingles to guide me in the right direction. All right. So and then when I saw the coins, and I had this electromagnetic tingles going through me, so I recognized the signs from my parents' spirits. I accepted it as real. Okay. It's the third step, the feel without overthinking. And this is where people tend to go wrong. You immediately, oh, this is a coincidence. Oh, I must be imagining this. Oh, this can't be real. Oh, there's an X. People torpedo the experience right there. You must feel without overthinking. When you start hyperanalyzing, you create a block. And then trust the message. Trusting the message. In this day and age, there's all sorts of, in the history of humanity, there's been all sorts of violent and crazy people doing things that I received a vision. Look, and I want to make this perfectly clear. There's a difference between messages from the collective consciousness, which you may call the divine, and my parents were the spokespeople for my collective, and messages from the human ego. The human ego is another way of looking at it, is edging God out. And that's when people will claim, oh, I received a vision, and that they are prone to commit acts of anger, bigotry, hatred, violence. Messages from spirits, messages from the divine are about peace, love, healing, resolution. They can involve protection. They may give you the heads up, warn you, intervene to prevent perhaps some type of accident, or in many of the readings I get, spirits will give me health information about the people that I'm doing readings for, telling them to get this condition checked. And so that's the difference. So if you think you're getting a vision to go start an insurrection or fly an airplane into a building or blow something up, that's not from God. That's not from the divine. That's not from your loved ones and spirits. That is from your own ego-driven agenda. And it's very important, I think, for everyone to understand that.
Interestingly enough, recently I was given a gift by one of my daughters with a reader here down in Sarasota. And I was able to recognize I was connected by 5 or 6 spirits from the other side who made contact with me and gave me messages. And the message that I received was that the only 2 things that are important in my life are love and forgiveness. And I was able to leave that session in the most positive frame of mind. And you're right, you're not going to get negativity from the other side. The people on the other side, they're here to love us and help us and share with us really, really important lessons. And if you're fortunate to be open enough to recognize it, there are many gifts waiting for you. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely, there are. And I want to address something. A lot of people feel that spirit communication is somehow um, evil or negative. And a lot of people go to the, scripture, the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy, it says, don't consult with mediums and all this. And that's in Deuteronomy 18. But if you continue reading, it's a very long passage. There's a Deuteronomy 22 where it says, "How do we know a word the Lord has not spoken?" And it said that if the message received by a prophet, and that's what Scripture refers to as a medium or a psychic, does not come true, then it's not the real thing. So, in other words, if what comes through is truthful and can be verified, then it is. And then when you go into the New Testament, to Romans 12, verses 6 through 8, talks about the various gifts from God, including prophecy. But one of my favorite is the first book of Corinthians, chapter 12, verses 4 through 12. And it says that we are all given gifts from God, and it gives a list of them. And it specifically says prophecy and discernment of spirits, plural. And that's what spirit communication is. So a lot of misguided religious extremists, they take the salad bar approach to religion. They pick and choose what they want so they can cast the first stone. But when you start in, I've been studying the Bible. I've studied not just the Bible, but the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas, the Quran. I study all religions. And, this whole idea of spirit communication is bad, but all of these belief systems are loaded with people who communicate with spirits, and it's seen as a positive thing. And I know there's always going to be people who disagree with me, but isn't that the beauty of living in a free society? We have freedom of speech and freedom of, and dare I say, from religion.
Oh my gosh, I think I should have Bill Maher on the show next. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about two books I wrote about priceless personalities. And these are all amazing people that have been on my show that I have been able to share with you. Have you ever met someone who was unforgettable? Someone who has touched your heart and soul? People who have faced difficult problems? People who have struggled to find solutions? People who fearlessly shared their stories? People who have not only informed you, but inspired you? People who have priceless personalities? I have been fortunate to host an internet radio talk show called January Jones Sharing Success Stories, and it has been my privilege to interview hundreds of guests. My guests have shared their stories, their struggles, their secrets, and their successes in their own words. In this book, we're talking about people dealing with problems such as incest, molestation, runaway kids, child abuse, drug abuse, polygamy, unemployment, scandal, and starting over. Then there are my guests dealing with difficult physical struggles such as blindness, cancer, and birth defects that are beyond traumatic. My guests have all been exciting, eclectic, and energizing. They have amazed, amused, and even astonished me. I have adored getting to meet them, and I adore sharing them with you.
Attention all listeners. Priceless Personalities, Success Stories Shared by January Jones, Volume 2 is now available at Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle editions. You'll be able to meet 10 amazing people who will be sharing their own personal stories with all their struggles, successes, and solutions, sprinkled with lots of humor and hope. Priceless Personalities features a teenager who becomes one of the famous Supremes from Motown. A nurse who, as a humorist, helps people to heal, an inspiring laughter yoga instructor, a mother dealing with the loss of a child, an incredible motivational speaker, a woman who married 5 times, a gifted paranormal nurse, a wise economist, a funny female humorist, along with an older man sharing his sweet childhood in the Deep South. January's guests are all amazing and amusing. You will never forget meeting them. Go to Amazon.com for your own priceless experience.
Welcome back. And I'm with another very, very priceless personality that I've been honored to have on my show. Mark, let's talk a little bit about you sharing with our listeners your website, your books, how they can get them, how they can contact you if they'd like to have a reading.
Certainly. And just like, you held up my book, The Afterlife Frequency, and
Yes.
my website's the same, afterlifefrequency.com. And even if you put theafterlifefrequency.com, you'll still go to the same site. And I encourage and invite everyone to sign up for my newsletter to keep you up to date on my upcoming events. 2023 is going to be pretty action-packed. I'm going back out on tour, so I'm looking forward to that. You can find out about my books, The Afterlife Frequency, Evidence of Eternity, and Never Letting Go. And as January, and I really want to thank you for saying how my books would be the ideal Christmas gift for anyone who's facing not just the holidays, but the rest of your life without a loved one.
Mhm.
And all my books, don't expect a dry read. I know we talk a lot about science in this interview, but
Yeah.
I try to write my books like juicy novels. And the reason for that is I was bored stiff in the practice of law, reading boring legal opinions. Law school is even worse. I mean, try trudging through federal basic income taxation. It was like, oh my God. But the thing is, I promise I've never inflict that on anyone. So you can visit my website, afterlifefrequency.com, to sign up for my newsletter, find out about scheduling a reading with me, my live stream show, The Psychic and the Doc, where you can call in, and about getting your free online subscription to Best Holistic Life magazine, which I'm a writer. So all that you can find out at afterlifefrequency.com.
Wonderful. And reiterating the holidays, you never know what to give people or what to get. This is a good gift. This is a gift that will help people heal. It's a difficult time of year, especially for anyone who has gone through loss at this time of year. It's a sad time, but yet you have to pull yourself together, guys, and go one step at a time and take it on as it comes. I'm down in Sarasota, and now where are you in Florida, Mark?
I'm near Kennedy Space Center, about on the East Coast, Central Florida. So pretty much, if you draw a line straight across the state from where you are, that's going to be my neighborhood.
Okay.
And but I spend a lot of time in California. Since the pandemic, I haven't been in I don't think I've been out there. I've been to Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and South Carolina, Virginia. So I've been doing a little bit of touring, hoping to do some more. Well, not hoping. I'm definitely doing some more in 2023. It's already set up.
Well, we spent over 40 years in California, and we loved it. We left when my husband retired and went to Arizona, but then the altitude at 5,000 got to my lungs, and now we're in Florida. And all three places are wonderful paradise places to live. I'm glad you're going to be doing more touring. This is what's happened after the pandemic. We all hibernated. And I had been on hiatus for 3 years with the show. But then after the pandemic, I've come out of my cocoon, and it's good. It's good. We all need to get out there and reach out to other people.
We do. And it's interesting because I saw on the news today, they said that the flu season's really bad right now, but the last 2 years it hasn't been because people were wearing masks.
Mhm.
And I don't want to get into the whole because people go just crazy about this, but just use your common sense. Use your common sense. But all I can say is I'm really glad that my parents and grandparents didn't act as whacked out about vaccines, about the polio vaccine, as some people are now. But I prefer, I read science. I'm a science guy.
And I guess I'm a science gal too, and I'm so thankful I had the Salk vaccine. And I remember when I was 5 years old, and the first funeral I ever went to was for a little boy who was 7 years old. He was in his first Holy Communion suit, and he died of polio.
Oh,
And yeah, that's the first funeral I ever went to. And believe me, our parents raced to get the vaccine for us, and it changed our lives, all of ours. So we have to be, as you said, very open to science. And your book is just an incredible scientific experience that both myself and my husband could read and enjoy and relate to. It's been so fun having you on the show. Now, before we go, I always ask my guest if they could have dinner with one person besides me, living or dead. Who would you choose to spend a dinner hour with, Mark?
oh, there are so many. Jesus, of course, would be the top of the list, but I have to say Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein. He's always been one of my heroes, and just to experience him, his mind. And the joke I like to make is, well, Cleopatra would be very interesting too, but I think I'd want someone to taste my food first. Because if she didn't like you, people that she didn't like tended to disappear. But I think Albert Einstein, because he really was a beautiful blend of genius and faith, and he was a genuinely nice man. And I have to admit that when I was at Princeton University, I snuck into his classroom where he used to teach, and technically it was off limits and I wasn't supposed to be there, but I just wanted to stand for a moment right where he stood, and it was such an honor to be there.
Oh, for sure. Did you go to Princeton?
I did not. I was on a speaking tour up there. I went to law school in Georgia, but my practice of law, or rather my study of law, also included some time at Oxford University in England. And that was really cool too. I mean, walking down hallways that you knew that the likes of Shakespeare and Winston Churchill and Queen Elizabeth I and maybe even Henry VIII walked down was just, I just loved it. I remember the day I left Oxford, I was fighting tears. I was just so happy there. It is just an amazing place.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And I look forward to having you back again. Our show is live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And next week, Jim Messikim will be with us. And his mother was Mrs. Cunningham from Happy Days. So he's a great impersonator. So he'll be sharing his story with us. My 79-year-old thought for the day: 2 things to make your day better. 1, do not watch the news. 2, do not get on the bathroom scale. There you go. Thank you for entering the No Wine Zone with me today. Please share our stories and our show with everyone you know. Remember, stop whining, start smiling, just the way Mark is doing now. And if that doesn't work, then you can just start eating chocolate, lots and lots of chocolate. Dear listeners, take care and stay safe until we meet again.
We want to thank you for listening to January Jones Sharing Success Stories. Always remember Ms. Jones' personal mantra: if you can think it, you can do it. That's what all of our guests have done with their lives, and so can you. You are the ultimate success coach in your own life. All you need to do will be to start sharing your own story with your family and friends. We hope that our guest stories will encourage you to explore an equation in your future that will combine your creativity plus connecting with others will enable you to be successful too. Always remember, your passion plus your purpose will equal prosperity as you explore the wonderful world of January Jones.